Welcome to Chapter 9, Sex and Gender. We're discussing sex and gender. In this chapter, it's about the way people see or define people and the way they define themselves. If you have not noticed, each chapter is adding to another. Remember conflict theory and how it is being brought into each chapter? Keep in mind how we discussed culture in the chapter, then we explored discrimination and prejudice. Keep all these chapters in mind as we build onto each other. So, what do sociologists mean when we talk about sex? We're talking about biology. When you're born, the majority of people are labeled boy or girl based on anatomy and biology. This is when it is put on a birth certificate. Those things that are reviewed, such as reproductive organs and other biological factors. It is a primary sex characteristic. But for some, they do not have exclusive male or female organs. This is known as intersex. This makes up about 1.2% of the world's population. There's also what's called secondary characteristics. Usually, this is discovered during puberty because we start to see physical differences such as hair, the body type, maybe widening hips, bone structure. We can see different ways that characteristics that are typically seen in males and females as they're hitting that puberty stage. What's the difference between sex and gender? So, sex, remember, is biological, that they would say what you're born with your organs. But on the other hand, we're going to be looking at gender. Now, looking at gender and sex, some people believe gender roles have a genetic organs and can't be changed, such as the hunter-gatherer, or there's been shows where Mr. Mom was a movie and that was absolutely not the norm because men are expected to have certain roles. But as sociologists, we look at the definition of gender. We believe that gender is defined by the physical behavior and personality traits that a group considers normal for its male and female members. Now remember, when we're looking at different things, the norm can be different. So what's the norm? It could be different for different people, different environments. People can have different views. Things can change over time. So that norm is different. And how is this defined? Remember, I said always ask questions and explore. Now, there's different forms of gender. We have one known as gender binary. This is when there is a defined only two genders, male and female. But now remember, there are also people that are known as essentialists, where they say that gender is based on biology. So they're relating their gender specifically back to the sex. But there are constructionists believe that gender is sociologically determined. That means people can decide and determine it themselves, but also there is people don't have to be gender binary, so they can choose. They don't have to be male or female in that sense. So how do people identify their gender? We want to call this gender identity. Um, we decide ourselves, and for some it's clear and how they define themselves, but for others, they face confusion, often not feeling a distinct role in gender binary. They can feel discrimination, they can feel prejudiced, so they're dealing with it either through health related, family. They could do with education. There can be some bullying. So sometimes you're defining your identity of gender based on outside resources or again socialization. So this can be part of your gender identity or can change how you feel when you're trying to identify your gender. So, what are some possible genders people define themselves as? Well, there's the cisgender. People identify with the sex that they are assigned with at birth. Those that define themselves as transgender, on the other hand, identify themselves different from the sex they were assigned at birth. So, for example, if someone is born female, with cisgender, they would identify themselves as female. But if they're transgender, they're going to identify themselves, if they were born female, as male. Then we have non binary. This is when a person does exclusively define themselves as a man or woman, or they can see themselves as both. So there's no definition of I'm a man or a woman. Um, they can decide if they want to be a man, a woman, or they can be both in that sense. Quickly, as we move on to our sexuality, you may want to ask the question, can gender definition for yourself, your identity, change over time? Yes. Maybe as a child you identified as a female. Maybe as an adult you might have identified as a male, or you may have decided to identify yourself as both. So these can be very different and change over time. Now let's talk about sexuality and how we identify ourselves. So we look at sexual desire of a particular gender. So we often know what homosexuality is. We are attracted to the same gender, and heterosexuality is attracted to the opposite sex. But some people don't know what LGBTQ means. Let's explore this a little bit further. So, of course, L and G are known as lesbian and gay, so they would fall under the section of homosexual. Then we have B, which we talked to, is bisexuality. They are attracted to both gender. Transgender, we just talked about. That means the identification of being maybe female, but identifying as male or vice versa. Queer is the emphasis and importance of different genders, and they may reject the idea of innate identity. This can be known as asexual or intersex. They don't have a particular uh, gender that they're interested in, and there may be no interest in sexuality. So we are trained and learn what it's masculine and feminine. Our gender socialization can be from home, schools, friends, sports, clubs, activities, and even media. So whenever you're around, think about these elements that can impact what you consider with with what you are identifying with your gender and your sexuality. So we're going to address some sexism, and let's address it particularly with males. So you see the picture of time to man up. That's often some things we hear. For males, they are told boys don't cry. They are supposed to be the breadwinner. They're expected to be leaders, more superior, you know, more muscular. So they're taught that or told these things. In some societies, it is expected males to be dominant, and there's known as patriarchy. So, some incidents, such as higher pay, leadership positions, or even politics, are seen as privileges, not necessarily earned. Remember prejudice? That's the idea that characteristics of one group is applied. So how can this be applied as it relates to sex or gender? We also see discrimination on this group. Example will go to women as it relates to women, work, and families. Why are they treated differently than men? So going a little further into the masculine part, we have what's sometimes known as toxic masculinity. Men are expected to be tough, aggressive. They live with the idea that they are to be aggressive, verbally, physically, financially. This could be things that can happen in the locker room, bullying, or at home. They can do this to men or women. We call this toxic masculinity. So, do we accept this or encourage this in our society? Remember how I said each chapter is building onto each chapter? Look at this with this chapter. How does the conflict theory or symbolic theory play a role in this? Look at families of your own. Okay, we have discussed men. Now let's discuss women. In families, what is often expected? We are given dolls and little kitchens as girls. Society expects women to shop or be the homemaker. Classes are often filled with women with home ec classes, and they are discouraged from being engineers or auto mechanics. There is a term known as the second shift, and this is known as when women work all day and then they're to come home and take care of the home with cooking and cleaning and caring for the children. And we are seeing some changes. We are also seeing statistically more single mothers than men facing poverty. This can be due to lower pay or having to pay for childcare and the greater needs for children. When looking at the poverty level in Charlotte with women, they outrank men. Who plays what role in your family? There are different roles, and these can include the person that's more of the authority figure, or these are known as the instrumental role. But then there's also the person you can turn to when you're having a bad day, that gives you a caring ear, that's there to take the expressive role. We also want to look at the different challenges people face. We talked about women, but there are parts of it that we didn't discuss. So let's talk about a few things. Feminism. In some cases, the word feminist has been known as an ugly word. But think about feminism with the history. This is a belief that there should be equality across all sexes. Women, for example, can a woman be a political leader or get certain jobs, the challenges they face? The start of this was organizing and protests for women to vote. So you'll see this in the early 1900s. Some were jailed and many took high risk. And this could be with their families. This could be with their job. Then there was the 60s and 70s where we heard of, they started to discuss jobs, pay, education. So women were organizing for that. Today we've heard of the Me Too movement. Now don't think with feminism or that men are not supporting them. There are some men that have stood with these women along the way. And some men, there are different fights for men. Some men have grouped together to discuss toxicity and challenges with the role of masculinity and being liberated from it. But others were against these changes with men's liberation. They wanted to keep things the same. They're against feminist and put it as a dirty word and discriminated word. But remember, not all men are against feminists and support the movement. Lastly, let's discuss the LGBTQ and the fight they have to go through. They have created support groups for adults and teens. They have also created nonprofits to support others. They have fought and won in some states the right to marry. They've created awareness and protests and parades to help encourage and even get some businesses to be supportive. We have looked at the different ways people can call themselves, such as they, she, him, her. They're going to see different ways to express themselves. But still, they face the challenges, for example, with healthcare, being allowed to go back with your partner, your spouse, um, people being recognized with them as family or having both. So, for example, when a child is born, many places they will only recognize one of the people as being the parent. At times, the other person can adopt them, but they do have limitations legally. And they also face discrimination. The looks, the speaking, people being fearful around. So keep that in mind as also a fight. With each group, we're seeing different things they have to go and address. Reminders. This week, you have two assignments. One is the paper. It's known as your signature assignment. This is a very important paper. I have attached a video from PBS. It also has the transcript, so if you need to, and your learning style is different, you can read that or you can watch the video. This is going to have to do a lot with your comprehension of the material and critical thinking. If you need support or information about critical thinking, would like me to go over the paper and look at it before you submit it, make some suggestions, we can go back and forth over that. Just email it to me, and we can go over that either virtually or with an email. I do have some students already scheduling this, and I'm happy to do so. Just email me and I'll respond within 48 hours or less. Typically, I definitely respond much earlier. If you email me after 10 p.m., I will not be responding to till the next morning. Usually it's about 8 or 9 a.m. that I will respond, and I check my email a couple of times a day. But just keep that in mind. You also have a quiz that you need to do. So remember Chapter 9 quiz. All your assignments are due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. I will not take any exceptions unless you have a healthcare issue that you can share with me before it is due. If you have one of those things where you go to the ER, please let me know. If you have a death in your immediate family, please let me know. But you will only have a few days to complete it if I give you an extension. If you are struggling and just haven't gotten to it, I can't give you an extension in that case. Now, give me up to 1 week for grading. You have to remember, I have a lot of students, and I want to make sure to thoroughly look over what you've submitted. I'm happy to assist you by email or virtually. I can again look over the paper before you submit it if you would like. It's not required. And just so a note, because people have asked me about it, I will be providing extra credit after your Chapter 9 is submitted. So don't stress, it will be coming and it will be available to everyone. So I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll talk again at Chapter 10.